The billionaire had everything, except purpose. The boy had nothing, except an idea that could save millions. What happened when their worlds collided changed forever the meaning of power, wealth, and innovation. Hey everyone, welcome to our channel. If you love stories that challenge the impossible and show how a single idea can transform the world, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right now and drop a like. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you tuning in from today to hear this extraordinary story? Nobody expected much from that year's Global Innovation Conference. The Geneva event had become so predictable. The same faces, the same repackaged ideas, the same bored investors pretending to care while secretly checking stock prices on their phones. Robert Keller was the worst of them all. At 53, the CEO of Quantum Futures was known for three things: his $16 billion fortune, his impatient glare that intimidated CEOs of major corporations, and his ability to walk out of meetings mid-presentation without saying a word. 10 more minutes, he whispered to his assistant while checking his platinum watch. Then come up with some emergency. In the main hall, the event was running like clockwork. Executives in perfect suits presented upward trending graphs. Startups promised to revolutionize markets. Everyone fighting for 5 minutes of attention from the few who, like Keller, could transform ideas into empires with a single bank transfer. That's when the perfect schedule fell apart. An unusual buzz formed at the side entrance. Security guards talked nervously. The event coordinator gestured, visibly upset. And then, under the surprised stares of the global tech elite, a 12-year-old boy walked onto the stage. He wore a simple white shirt, khaki pants that seemed a few sizes too big, and carried a worn-out backpack from which he pulled out something that looked like an unlikely combination of a plastic bottle, exposed circuits, and some unknown greenish material. "My name is Amara Diallo. I'm 12 years old and I come from Bamako, Mali," he announced in precise English, though with a heavy accent. "I wasn't scheduled to be here, but I believe what I have to show can't wait another year." Keller, who was already preparing to leave, froze. Something about this boy's determination, the incongruity of his presence in this temple of global capitalism, caught his attention like no million-dollar pitch had in years. "In my village, 23 children died last year from waterborne diseases," Amara continued, his firm voice contradicting his fragile appearance. "Not because solutions don't exist, but because existing solutions cost too much money." The audience, initially uncomfortable with the interruption, now watched in silence. Organizers hesitated to remove the intruder. The image of Swiss security guards dragging an African child off stage would certainly go viral for all the wrong reasons. "This device," Amar held up his creation, "uses a biological compound I developed from moringa seeds, combined with passive solar filtration and a biofeedback system that monitors quality for less than $1. Keller leaned forward involuntarily, not for the device itself, but for the mathematical impossibility the boy represented. How could a child from one of the poorest countries in the world, with limited access to formal education, articulate concepts that challenged entire teams of engineers with million-dollar budgets? "I can demonstrate," said Amara, pouring visibly murky water from a bottle into his device. "In 47 seconds, this water will be 99.7% free of pathogens and heavy metals." The silence in the room was absolute when Amara, after exactly the time he promised, drank the filtered water without hesitation. It was at this moment that Robert Keller, for the first time in 2 decades of global conferences, raised his hand to ask a question. Not a polite gesture of simulated interest, but the urgent movement of someone who had just glimpsed something he couldn't fully comprehend, and desperately needed to understand. What nobody realized in that instant was that this wasn't just a rich man interested in technology. It was an encounter that would redefine the meaning of innovation, purpose, and legacy. An unlikely meeting between two souls separated by continents, culture, and circumstances, but united by a truth that both instinctively understood: some ideas are too big to wait. Clean water isn't a luxury, it's life. These were the words Amara's mother repeated as they walked 5 kilometers together every day to the nearest well. At 6 years old, Amara watched his little sister, Fatumata, fall sick after drinking from the same water that had sustained the village for generations. 3 days of high fever, his mother's sleepless eyes, his father selling the family's only radio to buy medicine that arrived too late. "Why does the water hurt us?" Amara asked as they buried the small body wrapped in colorful fabrics. Nobody answered. There was no answer that made sense to a child, but that question planted a seed that would grow stronger than the 100-year-old baobab tree in the center of the village. A month later, when the humanitarian aid team visited Nyamana for the first time in 2 years, Amara didn't ask for candy like the other kids. He asked for science books. "This boy is different," remarked the teacher at the only local school where 73 children squeezed into a room with a straw roof. "He doesn't accept 'just because' as an answer." At 8 years old, Amara transformed a corner of the family's small yard into his laboratory. Empty soda bottles brought by truck drivers became test containers. Pounded charcoal turned into his first experimental filter. A broken magnifying glass, a gift from a tourist, became his tool to examine water under sunlight. By the time he turned 10, Amara's routine defied the impossible. He woke up at 5 a.m. to help his father in their small cornfield, then walked 3 kilometers to school. In the afternoon, he carried water with his mother. Only at nightfall, by the light of a solar lantern with an unreliable battery, did he dive into donated books and his meticulous notes. "He falls asleep hugging those notebooks," his father told the neighbors, mixing pride with worry. "He dreams about clean water the way other boys dream about soccer." The turning point came when a satellite internet project installed a community access point in the neighboring village. Once a week, Amara walked 8 kilometers for 30 precious minutes online. "Teacher, what is nanofiltration?" he asked the school principal after one of these trips. The man smiled, confused. "Something we don't have here, Amara." "Not yet," the boy replied. On full moon nights, when saving energy wasn't necessary, the village children gathered around Amara. Not to hear traditional stories, but to watch his improvised demonstrations. "If we mix these crushed seeds with a bit of sand and charcoal," he showed them, creating a greenish paste that visibly cleared the muddy water. His first filter saved 2 lives when the rainy season contaminated the main well. They weren't perfect. Adults still boiled the water after filtering. But they were the beginning of something revolutionary. When a Doctors Without Borders physician visited the region and saw Amara's work, he was amazed. "How did you learn this?" "Necessity teaches more than any school," the boy answered, repeating a proverb his grandfather had told him. It was this doctor who, months later, sent the letter that would change everything. An invitation for Amara to present his project at a side event of the Global Innovation Conference. No one expected the boy, with his worn-out backpack and oversized clothes handed down from his older cousin, to ignore the secondary event and walk straight to the main stage. No one except his mother, who whispered as she said goodbye, "Water doesn't wait, son, and neither should you." Robert Keller never told anyone about the small portrait he kept in the locked drawer of his desk. A yellowed photo of a woman with a tired smile in front of a simple wooden house. "Who is she?" his assistant once asked, surprising him with the portrait in hand after an earthquake knocked objects over in the office. "Nobody," he answered dryly, putting the photo away. "Just organize tomorrow's schedule." But that woman was somebody. She was Sarah Keller, his mother, who raised 3 children alone in a small rural town in Oregon, working 2 jobs and saving every penny so her youngest, Robert, could study. "You're going to change things," she used to say. "You'll create something that helps people like us." This dream propelled young Robert through scholarships, sleepless nights programming, and finally, the creation of Quantum Futures, a company that transformed digital communications and turned its founder into a billionaire before he turned 35, but somewhere between the first and 7th billion, something got lost. The man now watching the African boy on the Geneva stage was no longer Sarah's son. He was a money-making machine, a Wall Street predator, the type of executive who measured success by vacation homes and yachts, not by transformed lives. "Why did that kid affect you so much?" his assistant asked as they left the conference after Keller had talked with Amara backstage for 40 minutes. Keller remained silent, watching the lake view through the limo window. How could he explain that? Seeing that boy, he saw himself before the corporate world swallowed his ideals? That night, in the presidential suite, Keller couldn't sleep. He opened his laptop and read everything about Mali, about water crises, about child mortality related to contaminated water. Frightening numbers appeared on screen. 3.5 million annual deaths. Children losing 4.43 million school days due to water-related diseases, numbers, statistics, data, the language he understood. At 3:43 a.m., he did something he hadn't done in decades. He called his older brother. "Mike, do you remember the promise we made to Mom?" he asked, without even saying hello. "It's almost 4 in the morning, Rob. I promised to change the world, to create something that mattered." A sigh from the other end of the line. "And you created a fortune instead." The truth hurt more than any financial loss report. By dawn, Keller had made his decision. He called an urgent video conference with his lawyers and financial advisors. "I want to create a foundation. No, more than that. I want to invest directly in this kid's project. $7 billion. The silence on the call was deafening. "Mr. Keller," his CFO finally spoke, "that's almost half of your net worth." "Actually," Keller replied, feeling a strange peace, "it's exactly the amount I've accumulated over the last 10 years doing things that don't matter." Hours later, when he communicated his decision to Amara and his improvised support team, the boy surprised him. "Why?" he simply asked. "Why do you want to help?" Keller could have offered dozens of business answers: market opportunity, corporate social responsibility, strategic positioning. But he found himself telling the truth. "Because I have everything money can buy and nothing that truly matters. And you have something I lost a long time ago, a genuine purpose." That afternoon, as he signed the first documents for the transfer, that would shock Wall Street. Keller took his mother's photo from his wallet. "I'm coming back," he whispered to the portrait. "Better late than never, right?" The smile on the worn face in the photo seemed to answer that, yes, it's never too late to find your soul again. The news exploded like a bomb on a Tuesday morning. Headlines screamed in bold, "Tech billionaire invests $7 billion in African boys project." In the mirrored building of quantum futures, chaos broke out even before the market opened. Executives ran through the hallways. Phones rang non-stop. Keller's secretary hung up on journalists every 30 seconds. "He's completely lost his mind," shouted Marcus Wheeler, the main shareholder, pounding the conference room table. $7 billion on a homemade water filter made by a child. The company's stock plummeted 18% in the first minutes of trading. Financial analysts appeared on every specialized channel predicting the collapse of the Keller empire. On social media, memes showed the billionaire throwing money out the window. In the middle of this hurricane, Robert Keller remained strangely calm. Wearing a navy blue suit without a tie, something unthinkable for him a week ago, he prepared for the most important press conference of his life. "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" his assistant asked, worried. The legal department prepared a more conservative statement. Keller smiled, rolling up his sleeves, another gesture never seen before. "For the first time in a long time, I'm sure of what I'm doing." The auditorium was packed. Cameras from around the world pointed at the stage. In the left corner, Amara watched everything with wide eyes, accompanied by a representative from the Mali embassy and the doctor, who helped him get to Geneva. When Keller took the stage, the silence was instant. Everyone expected explanations, financial justifications, maybe even an announcement that it was all a misunderstanding. "Good morning," he began, without using the teleprompter prepared by his team. "I'll get straight to the point. Yes, I am investing $7 billion in the water purification project developed by Amara Diallo." Flashes fired, reporters pushed each other. "Mr. Keller," shouted a CNBC journalist, "your shareholders are calling this financial suicide. How do you respond?" Keller took a sip of water, ironically the first time he really appreciated the taste. "For 20 years, I've amassed a fortune developing technologies that make people more digitally connected and more humanly disconnected. Today, I'm investing in something that literally saves lives. "But why so much money?" insisted another reporter. "This technology could be developed with much less." "Because this isn't just about a water filter," Keller replied. "It's about creating a new model of technological development. We're going to build research centers in 5 African countries, hire local scientists, integrate traditional knowledge with cutting-edge technology, and do all this led by minds like Amara's." A murmur ran through the auditorium when Keller called the boy to join him on stage. The contrast was powerful. The executive in the expensive suit and the skinny teenager with worn-out sneakers. "Mr. Keller," asked a Financial Times reporter, "the market is calling this madness. What do you say to that?" Keller looked at Amara, then at the audience, and finally smiled. A genuine smile that no photographer had captured in years. "Maybe it is madness," he said, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. "But for the first time in a long time, I'm investing in something bigger than money. I'm investing in hope." At the back of the auditorium, his lawyers were shaking. On the stock exchange, traders were frantically selling shares. On financial programs, experts predicted his ruin. But in that moment, with the world's cameras capturing, the image of the man who had everything beside the boy who had almost nothing, something new was born. Not just a revolutionary water purification project, but an uncomfortable question that would echo through the corridors of power from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. What if true success wasn't measured by how much you earn, but by how much you transform? "We're not building laboratories, we're building bridges," explained Amara during the planning meeting, his voice growing more confident with each passing day. 6 months after the announcement that shook Wall Street, the Clean Water Project, as the press nicknamed it, had taken shape. But not in the way everyone expected. Instead of bringing the entire operation to the United States, as the consultant suggested, Keller and Amara did something revolutionary. They spread the development across 2 continents, with the heart of the research beating in Africa. The first center was built just 20 kilometers from Amara's village, not an intimidating glass and steel building, but a circular structure inspired by traditional Malian architecture, powered by solar energy and built with local sustainable techniques. "My grandmother always said that knowledge is like water. It needs to flow in all directions to give life," remarked Amara as he showed Keller around during his first visit to Mali. At the center of the building, an unlikely team was forming. Stanford-trained engineers working side by side with traditional healers who knew every local plant. 20-year-old programmers collaborating with 80-year-old elders who kept century-old secrets about natural purification. "They're laughing at us in Palo Alto," commented Caroline Chen, a brilliant chemical engineer who left a secure position in Silicon Valley to join the project. "They say we're wasting technology on primitive knowledge." "Let them keep laughing," replied Keller, observing an intense discussion between a PhD in nanomaterials and an elder who never attended formal school. "Meanwhile, we're creating something none of them could imagine on their own." In 4 months, similar centers appeared in Kenya, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Morocco. Each one focused on adapting Amara's basic technology to specific local conditions. Meanwhile, at the newly opened Quantum Water campus in San Francisco, another kind of revolution was happening. Amara, now with a special scholarship to study at Stanford at 13, divided his time between school and the central laboratory. "How do you balance all this?" asked a journalist during a rare interview given by the young man. Amara smiled. "In my village, 6-year-old children carry water for miles every day. Studying and creating is much easier than that." The real secret behind the project's rapid advancement wasn't just the billions invested, but the radically new approach. Technology developed in the communities that would use it, by people who understood the real needs. At an innovation conference in Berlin, a scientist questioned Keller, "How long until you patent everything and start to recover your investment?" The answer shocked the audience. "There will be no closed patents. All knowledge generated will be shared open source." In the main design office, where engineers were finalizing version 3.0 of the purifier, a framed photo caught attention. Amara, at 10 years old, smiling next to his first prototype made from plastic bottles. "Never forget where we started," said the plaque under the image. "Simplicity is the path." On a hot August afternoon, while data from simultaneous tests arrived from the 5 African centers, Keller found Amara sitting alone in the campus garden, looking at his tablet screen. "Problems?" asked the billionaire sitting next to him on the bench. "No," replied Amara, showing a video. "My baby sister was just born. My mother named her Aisha. It means life." Keller observed the small family, celebrating in a simple house but very different from the hut where Amara grew up. "New house?" he asked. "Yes. New house, new community well, new school in the village." Amara paused. "And she'll never have to worry about contaminated water." Keller felt a lump in his throat. The numbers in financial reports, the prototypes, on laboratory benches, the endless meetings, everything culminated in this simple moment. A child being born with the promise of clean water. 2 continents, 2 realities. One shared vision of what technology really means when it serves life. The sky dawned gray over Nyamana on that special morning. Heavy clouds promised rain, a rare and precious gift in the drought-stricken region. "It's a good sign," commented Amara's grandfather Ibrahim, adjusting his indigo-blue turban while watching the horizon. "The sky cries with joy today." 3 years had passed since that unlikely meeting in Geneva. 3 years of tireless work, immense challenges, and surprising breakthroughs. Now, finally, the day of the official inauguration had arrived. The purification system based on Amara's technology would be activated in his own village. This wasn't just any installation. It was the first of a network already serving 30 million people across 7 African countries, with plans to reach 100 million by the end of the following year. The village was unrecognizable, not just because of the central purification structure, an elegant system combining Amara's original vision with 3 years of improvements, but because of the transformation the project had indirectly brought. Where mud huts once stood, simple but solid houses now rose. The school, previously a single space with a straw roof, was now an educational complex with a science lab and library. The health post, which used to operate just twice a month with 1 nurse, now had a permanent staff and telemedicine. "I never imagined I'd see this in my lifetime," whispered Amara's mother, Fatu, as she dressed little Aisha, now almost 3 years old, for the ceremony. The girl had never known the reality of contaminated water, the first generation with this privilege. Helicopters landed in the makeshift field on the outskirts of the village. Ministers from various African countries, executives, scientists, and journalists from around the world arrived to witness what the press called the water miracle. "Nervous?" asked Keller, now almost unrecognizable to those who knew him before. The impeccable suit had given way to khaki pants and a short-sleeve shirt. The tense executive expression had been replaced by laugh lines formed from frequent smiles. Even his hair, once always perfectly trimmed, showed some careless gray strands. "A little," admitted Amara, now 15 years old and several inches taller. "Not because of the important guests, but because of the responsibility," Keller finished. "Understanding. I know how you feel." The ceremony was scheduled for noon. At 11:30, as officials settled under the large tent set up in the central square, the first raindrops began to fall. "Should we postpone?" asked one of the organizers, concerned. "No way," replied Ibrahim, Amara's grandfather, who had been chosen to bless the installation. "The rain isn't an interruption. It's part of the celebration." When Amara stepped onto the small stage, the rain was falling steadily but gently. Nobody sought shelter. Guests in wet suits mingled with local residents. Children laughed, dancing, in the puddles that formed. 3 years ago, Amara began, his voice amplified by the speakers, "I showed a filter made from a plastic bottle at a conference far from here. Today, we return to where it all began, but with something much bigger than a filter." He gestured toward the covered structure. A group of children pulled the ropes, revealing the central purification system. Elegant in its simple design, revolutionary in its technology. "In our tradition," Amara continued, "we say that water is life, but I've learned that clean water is more than life, it's future." The numbers spoke for themselves. Since the implementation of the first regional systems, the infant mortality rate had fallen 87% in the areas served. Waterborne diseases had almost completely disappeared. School attendance had increased 63%, now that children weren't constantly sick or spending hours each day searching for drinking water. Keller, seated among the officials, wasn't watching the system being inaugurated, but the faces around him. He saw something that billions of dollars could never buy: genuine hope. After the official speeches, as the crowd dispersed under the now heavier rain, Ibrahim, Amara's grandfather, approached Keller. The elder extended his wrinkled hand, inviting the billionaire to walk to the village's old well, now transformed into a memorial. Side by side, the man who had built a technology empire and the elder who had never left Mali took shelter under the same tree. The rain fell around them, forming a silver curtain. "You know what I'm thinking?" asked Ibrahim, breaking the silence. "What?" replied Keller, feeling a deep respect for the man beside him. The elder lifted his face to feel the rain and smiled. "I'm thinking that you didn't bring water to us. You brought future." In that moment, under blessed rain and a century-old tree, the circle was complete. The boy, who dreamed of clean water, the billionaire who rediscovered his humanity. And between them, drops of clean rain, the simplest and most precious of gifts. "I know it sounds crazy," said Elizabeth Martinez, CEO of the world's largest oil company, "but after watching that Mali Kid's TED Talk, I decided to invest 30% of our annual profit in clean energy developed by young people from communities affected by oil extraction." 5 years after the inauguration of the first system in Niamana, the business world was witnessing a transformation nobody could have predicted. The Amara effect, as the Financial Times called it, was spreading like a silent wave among the planet's most powerful financial circles. In the atrium of the newly built Sahel University for Sustainable Innovation in Bamako, a golden plaque briefly told the story. Inspired by a homemade water filter founded by an unlikely partnership. Amara, now 20 years old and finishing his doctorate at Stanford, walked through the crowded hallways. Young people from across the African continent came to study at what had quickly become one of the most respected applied research centers on the planet. Professor Diallo called a Kenyan student running to catch up with him. "The results are in from the field test in the Arctic region. The system works even in extremely low temperatures." Amara smiled, taking the tablet she offered. The technology that was born to save lives in his village was now adapting to serve communities in the Arctic Circle, in mountainous regions of Nepal, and on remote Pacific islands threatened by rising sea levels. On the other side of the world, Robert Keller sat no longer in a corporate boardroom, but in an auditorium at Harvard Business School. Before him, 200 MBA students followed his lecture about what was now called the Keller-Amar model of investment. The real failure of global markets, he explained, projecting graphs on the screen, was measuring success only by financial return. What we discovered is that when you measure impact in improved lives, financial return ends up appearing naturally, just in a more widespread and distributed form. The numbers proved his theory. While many predicted his financial ruin after the insane $7 billion investment, reality turned out differently. The economic ecosystem created around the purification technologies had generated more than $30 billion in distributed value, not concentrated in the hands of a few shareholders, but spread among tens of thousands of professionals, communities, and local small businesses. Even more surprising was what happened next. 47 of the world's 100 largest billionaires adopted versions of the model, directing fortunes toward collaborations with young talents from developing countries. The change was so profound that the World Economic Forum created a new metric, the Human Impact Index, to measure the success of investments beyond financial return. On a rainy October afternoon, Amara and Keller walked together across the university campus in Bamako. The contrast between them, the young scientist and the businessman now in his 60s, remained striking, but in a different way. Now they shared the same quiet energy, the same silent certainty. "We received the invitation to Oslo," Amara commented casually. Keller nodded. The Nobel Peace Prize was just another confirmation of what they already knew. They had changed the world. "You know what makes me happiest?" asked Keller, stopping to watch a group of children visiting the campus. Among them was Aisha, Amara's sister, now 8 years old and dreaming of becoming a scientist like her brother. "What?" replied Amara. "These children will never know what the world was like before. For them, it's natural that wealth means sharing, that technology directly serves life, that big companies seek positive impact." That night, at a dinner with leaders from 23 countries, the World Bank president announced the global adoption of the financing model inspired by the project. "What began with a water filter in an African village," he declared, "has redefined how we understand development, investment, and human progress." At the back of the hall, Ibrahim, Amara's grandfather, now 87 years old, watched everything with moist eyes. At his side was Sarah, Keller's sister, who had flown from Oregon to witness the culmination of her brother's journey. "Our families always knew," commented Sarah, gently squeezing the elder's hand. "We always knew they were special." Ibrahim smiled, the wisdom of generations in his gaze. "Every human being is special, my friend. Some just have the chance to prove it to the world." As the sun set over Bamako's new horizon, no longer defined by poverty, but by universities, research centers, and a promising future, a simple truth echoed across the continent and beyond. The true value was never in the billions invested, but in humanity's capacity to reimagine the world. So, what did you think of this inspiring story? Can you imagine how small ideas can transform the world when they find the right people to support them? If this narrative touched your heart or sparked new perspectives, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and drop a like. We have many more exciting stories waiting to be told in our upcoming videos. And tell us in the comments, which part of this journey between Amara and Keller impacted you the most? Your opinion is super important for us to keep bringing content that inspires and transforms. See you in the next video.